Hey there, welcome to ATL and 29, a podcast that looks at the NBA from the starting point of Atlanta. My name is Kevin Chouinard. I'm here with Glenn Willis. We're recording the night after the Hawks won their season opener. Where do you want to begin, Glenn?
Nice to get a win. I think my favorite aspect of the night is a little bit more on the kind of the teammanship kind of things. I love them kind of standing up for each other. I love them kind of having a united front, when things got first of all, the foul on Dyson was bad. I don't think it was intended to be bad, but ended up I think the way it played out was bad. And so I understood Dyson taking a point with that. And then the other foul wasn't as bad, but I just like the Hawks standing up for one another. I think that's, from a psychological standpoint, that's helpful. We can get into, what they did well, what they didn't do well, and all that sort of stuff. But I just think the kind of the them presenting themselves as a team, as a unit, as guys who are going to advocate for one another. I think that's a nice way to start the season.
Yeah, I thought the Nets were, I guess, backing out a little bit. It's funny, like after watching some of the NBA preseason, now actually watching the regular season, it's like, where did all the space go? Like, why are all the defenses so much better now? It's like everything is a lot faster and tighter, and it seems like everybody's running out of room in the corners, and it just. But to be more specific about Brooklyn's defense, since you mentioned like those, a lot of like the Hawks didn't have a lot of punch in transition, and there were a lot of like hard fouls, like it seemed like Brooklyn was just kind of reckless, like not necessarily malicious, but even separate from like the two plays that were like the ones everybody focused on, like even in the 40 minutes before that, it just felt like they were just kind of running into people, kind of because the Hawks had a lot of breakaways. And why did they have a lot of breakaways, Glenn?
Because they have guys who can get their fingertips on the ball now.
They do. They do. And one in particular is,
Dyson Daniels,
yes, he is.
5 steals. Yep.
That's something else. Yeah, five steals and just nonstop like deflections, annoyance. It felt like for Brooklyn to do anything good, they had to just first start by screening Dyson off of whatever they wanted to proceed with. Like if they didn't do that, it felt like a lost cause.
Yeah, I'll come back to the Hawks, but I think we have to give credit to Cam Thomas because he was having no fun for 3 quarters. And I
His
always
first
admire when
quarter
they get,
wasn't even bad. It was awful. Like his first quarter was just
but
abominable. And it's like, wait, he's got 30 something points. Like, how did this happen? Like,
well, so and I want to come back to the Hawks, but like for a guy who sticks with it, and in the fourth quarter, like still had the mental toughness to kind of like, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out. Right. And he made some pretty ridiculous shots. He's kind of a ridiculous shot maker. That's kind of his thing. And so just a tiny little tip of the hat to him for not just like throwing his hands up in the air and being like, nobody's helping me. He figured it out and he gave his team a push at the end that made it interesting. And so, even when it's on the other team, I'm like, I can admire that. Like he's a fairly one-dimensional player, you know, but when his team needed someone to like produce some consistent points on consecutive possessions in the game, he came up with that. So just, teams will defend him a certain way and stuff like that. But I admire players who work through adversity and still find a way to kind of figure it out, unlock themselves. And so just a little tip of the hat to him for what he did late in the fourth quarter.
you said you were going to go to the Hawks, but before too. Like, was there something that you were going to say after that?
I mean, for so you know, we'll talk about my Patreon I started later on, but to me, they were a little disconnected on defense at times. I think that a lot of that has to do with certain lineups that did not play together at all in the preseason, right? And such. And so I think that's going to get better. I think Kongwu played what like half of one game in the preseason. Loki played kind of a game and a half, if I'm remembering correctly, roughly. So they had lineups and combinations out there that hadn't played together. And so, like, there's a play where Dyson and Hunter were trying to manage a back screen, defensively, and just a slow, just not a recognition and not a lot of contact. So, game one of the regular season, and that stuff I think will kind of come around. But my biggest concern defensively was just that they couldn't contain the ball as well as you'd think with the roster improvements. But a lot of that was middle DHO and a lot of downhill. And I mean, give credit to Ben Simmons. He knows how to kind of turn into a DHO and create an angle for his ball handler. So, credit to him for that. But the Hawks kind of figured out this. I have my favorite adjustment in the game. My single favorite adjustment in the game was Quinn putting Bogey on the ball in the fourth quarter and getting him out of low man. And and that there are a number of possessions where they had a Kongwu plus Jalen, helping from the kind of the weak side baseline, kind of side instead of Bogey. And we all know kind of Bogey has a tendency to overhelp and those sorts of things, but like let's get Bogey out of the low man role, just put him on the ball, So I thought, I mean, in the fourth quarter, I thought Quinn's adjustments were great. You know, it kind of got guys into optional and optimized kind of defensive roles. And I think that was, despite Cam Thomas's kind of crazy shot making at the end, I thought their role alignment defensively in the fourth quarter was great. And I think that's what helped them kind of finish the game strong.
Yeah, Ben Simmons is a good force as a DHO player, and I think Dennis Schroeder like has gotten better at that too. There
Good.
was one play where Dennis is bringing the ball up and Cam Johnson is in the backcourt with him, and Cam's probably 35 feet from the hoop being guarded by Riza Shea. And it's like Riza Shea is like, not particularly worried about Cam Johnson because even though he can make 29 40s, he's probably not shooting from 35, right? But Dennis like dribbled into the space between the two of them. And, at that point, Riza Shea was done because he like, just couldn't get over Schroeder's body at that point. And he really
Yeah.
like he didn't need to guard Cam Johnson, but he did need to be closer to him so that exactly that couldn't happen. Because,
Yeah.
the Nets are good at DHO and just, the more you look at the league, it seems like that's the trend of the last 5 years is more and more DHO. And so, they'll get better at it, but it does, it does test the connectedness of your defense. And at times, it's going to get somebody like Dyson off the ball, but at least you're committing them to making him get off the ball.
Yeah. Yeah, man, and I think Dennis deserves a lot of credit for the way he's grown, in the league. It's kind of funny because I always feel like guards who cycle through time with LeBron, LeBron tells his guards exactly what he needs from them, like exactly prescriptively. But Dennis knows how to take his own defender and dribble the ball right to a second defender and create space. I mean, he has just a lot of little. I mean, he's been in the league a long time now, and you ideally build up craft, over was it been 10 years in the league now? I'm kind of guessing there, or it feels
More.
like it, right? Yeah, more, yeah. And
2013, I think he started.
yeah, yeah. So we're looking at 12th year or so, right, in the league. So, I mean, he did a great job of kind of just electing a second defender and kind of creating some space. And I think a lot of the Hawks, I don't want to say disorganization, but just being a little slow to respond to what they were seeing collectively as a unit had to do with just, short preseason and the schedule was kind of thrown out of whack with the hurricane and, they had a big gap and all that sort of stuff. But you know, I like that Brooklyn coach they had. I mean, Jordy's he's an experienced coach. He's a good coach, and you could see the good coaching manifest, through a lot of the things that they were doing on the floor. They're still limited skill wise in the backcourt to a degree, and they don't have a lot of skill three through five apart from a little bit of shoot. Like I remember you and I talking last year. Like you pace their forwards off the 3-point line, you're not really worried about them making a play on the move, that kind of thing. But I mean, they played out. They they looked like a team that had good coaching built into what they were doing. and had intentionality to what they were doing. And I think that's why the game was so close. I think, Hawks fans who expected like, oh, Brooklyn's rebuilding, they, Brooklyn's gonna compete and push teams this year, even if they only win up winning 34 games or whatever it might be. So to me, that was a nice win for the Hawks.
What changed for the Hawks when Onyeka Okongwu came into the game? Because it seemed like the moment he came in, he was sort of getting behind the nets. Like he was, he was finding space where there wasn't necessarily space before, or at least there was nobody exploiting the space there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, interested in your thoughts too, but for me, Flint like needs a precise. I mean, at this point, I mean, everybody knows I love Clint. I absolutely love Clint, right? But he needs a more precise pass than he needed 2 years ago, right? And and if a defense forces him to catch the ball 14 feet from the rim, he's not going to make two dribbles and get to the rim. That's not what's in his skill, capability. And there's a lot that Clint offers. But Onyeka can put the ball on the floor. Onyeka can read the floor. Onyeka can read pass versus dribble and attack a small defender in front of me. And Onyeka just has a broader range of skills to lean on, depending upon what situation the defense puts him into, right? I can handle, I can pass, I can do whatever. What I loved about what he did last night was, the last 2, 3 seasons, like it's floater, floater, float. Maybe I'm um rec over indexing on like how much he leaned on his floater game the last 2, 3 years. Last night he was like, nope, on this possession, I'm looking at the rotation, I can get to the rim and just dunk the ball, you know. And one dribble, get to the rim. I mean, to me that was night and day difference, Onyeka. And for all the baseline defensive performance, high, moderate floor Clint gives you on defense, like, that's Clint doesn't have that stuff on offense. And so if you're going to run small lineups out there, I think Onyeka's seems to have kind of figured out that like I'm pretty strong, I'm pretty fast, I have ball handling skills. I can just like, oh, I can get to the front of the rim, and that's just something that Clint's never going to do. I still think Clint has a real role on this team. Another part of my favorite parts of my viewing the game last night was watching Clint cheer him on. Watching Clint cheer him on. I love that Quinn brought Clint back early in the late third quarter to set up closing with Onyeka. And to me, one of the first thing I published on my Patreon was like 5 keys to the season. And I was like, number one was sacrifice. And you and I both know Clint is an A+ platinum level teammate, and locker room guy. And that we saw that, you know, and there's going to be no drama, around that at all. But you and I also know there'll be other situations where opposing teams might have a really big physical center where Clint's going to have to play 28 minutes. And I would fully expect Onyeka to be cheering Clint on in that scenario. But if teams are going to force Trey to give the ball up, having Jalen at the 4, Onyeka at the 5, who can dribble, read the floor, make a decision, make the right, that is dynamic. And that's really, really different.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think, I don't even know if it's necessarily contradictory, but it didn't like you noted the ball skill and things like that, and I thought like even in just the first few minutes, it just felt like it was a little bit faster. I felt
Yeah.
like where he set up for his screens when he was playing with Trey were further from the hoop, and he was slipping it and just going fast, and it felt like a different dimension of sort of speed and stretching out the Nets defense, which, they weren't the biggest team. So, the more you spread them out, the less effective they are going to be holding up their arms and trying to intercept passes and stuff. And, once he was slipping screens from 29 feet away, unless they were very careful, he was fast enough to get behind them. It was just a constant lob threat for Trey. And that kind of opened a lot of things up for the Hawks at that point. So I thought first it was just almost like a geometric thing, like his speed and how far out he was starting kind of changed things for Trey because when Clint was out there, it just felt like Trey was getting a little bit too much attention
Yeah.
and that they weren't
Yes.
necessarily that worried about Clint.
Yeah, and I mean, and then there are other aspects that, like, number one, I talked about this with Brad when we kind of did a little bit of digging on Dyson. Dyson's not used to being a primary-ish ball handler in crunch time, you know. And I thought that showed up a lot last night, where it's just like not fully confident in kind of what he was doing. I mean, he's a good ball handler, but in terms of like he catches the ball 7 seconds on the shot clock, I'm confident in what I'm going. Like that was put down, you know. And in transition, I mean, maybe it's a little bit of kind of one of those things where you're watching Ben Simmons play. It's like Dyson didn't want to get to the free throw line. It's like Dyson didn't want to be super aggressive in transition, attacking the rim, and that sort of thing. And so that's a growth. That to me, that's the biggest growth area for Dyson. And when you're playing next to Trey, you have got to be, you have to power yourself to attack what's left when Trey rotates the ball to you. And I thought Dyson was a little shaky in there. I think he'll get there, right? I think he'll get there, but this is a brand new role, like starter every single game, playing next to Trey, and teams are going to force the ball out of Trey's hands. So I think it's just a matter of letting Dyson settle into that role. But I thought that was one of the things that kind of held the offense back, last night was kind of Dyson in that role. And then similarly, Jalen on the rewatch, Jalen made some like really high level passes, you know, but he seemed a little like last year, a little hesitant as looking to score um in that situation. But again, you know, first game, and I think the rewatch maybe film room kind of situation is Jalen just go, Dyson just go. Like you turn it over, we don't care. Just go, just attack, attacking an over leveraged defense that's trying to kind of rotate and stuff like that. But I mean, we've talked about it. For Jalen, the expectations are higher. Like, fans will attach the contract to that. I don't think internally that happens, organizationally. I think internally with Jalen, it probably happens where he's like, oh man, I really have to like, do more now or whatever to justify that. If I don't know Jalen, so I don't know if he's worried about optics around that or not. But for me, I think part of the offense performing at a more consistent level is Dyson and Jalen just being just a lot more solid and like, okay, when the ball finds me, I'm just going and not overly worrying about the result being perfect for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned Jalen made some good passes, but he was also hesitant. He also threw like a really like time and place wise, it was just a terrible pass because it was a situation where they probably got the ball with 30 seconds left, so they could take the clock to almost nothing. And he had the ball and he tried to get it into the middle where there were defenders there. And he threw that pass with like probably like 10 on the shot clock and 15 on the game clock before the quarter was going to expire and just gave Brooklyn another possession when they really shouldn't have gotten a
Yep,
possession. It was
great example.
it was tough, but it's a little bit weird. It's like when Dyson's out there and he's a little bit hesitant and not the greatest shooter, and Jalen's out there and he's a little bit hesitant and not the greatest shooter. It's almost like they're a little bit too duplicate on offense when you're playing with a center. It's almost like if you could play Daniels, Jalen, Nance, that would give them a little bit of a different dimension. If you had Nance kind of shooting, from above the break with two slashers that would work a little better than necessarily having two slashers that aren't making the instant reads properly when they have a seam or they have a decision or a quick pass that they can make. It's just a little bit too clunky on offense. And it felt like at times like Jalen sat a little bit more than you might want Jalen to sit just because they wanted to keep Hunter in there as a shooter. Like, it almost seemed like they were I don't remember exactly when it ended up playing, but it almost felt like they were shortchanging Jalen some minutes to keep Daniels in or something like that. I don't. It's hard to put an exact feel on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a part of that was Hunter got in foul trouble in the first half, and then I think Jalen's minutes were impacted by that, and then I think that domino effect kind of impacted where Bryson was kind of showing up and that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, I mean, game one, but like I said going into the fourth quarter, like I thought they would need a lot more from Jalen to win the game, and Trey was like, "I got this." you know, when they got the bonus, Trey was like, "Okay, Trey's smart." Like after the two kind of reviews for kind of potentially excessively physical play. Trey was like, they're going to call the game tight the rest of the way, so I'm just going to live at the free throw line. And Brooklyn, I think Brooklyn was rightfully frustrated, by kind of that. It was a pretty the refereeing kind of changed a lot after those. Now they contributed to it, for sure. But I felt like Trey just kind of that's one of those things where like, okay, I got this, and did what he had to do. Um, and but I do think like you kind of look at kind of going forward, and it's like Jalen, just attack, just attack, and I feel I don't know, I feel a little conflicted saying that because the passing part of his game last night was really high level and resulted in some really great shots at the rim. The dunk he
One thing
got,
like with
yeah,
Quinn, I asked Quinn about Jalen and rebounding this week, and it wasn't really I hadn't really geared the question this way, but he kind of turned it around and said that, one of the things that he liked from the preseason was if Jalen rebounds, Trey just needs to go. And he has been going. That's what he said. Trey's been doing a good job getting out on the wing. And if you go back and look at both of Zachary's buckets, they were both almost the same kind of situation. Jalen gets the rebound. It's kind of an all-out blitz in transition. And, Jalen's making not, not basic passes to Trey. I mean, they were outlet passes, but they were not easy outlet passes, and they were fast. And he probably got the ball to Trey around midcourt, and then Trey is just going from there. And one time he got Zachary for a wide open three. One time he found Zachary underneath the rim for a dunk. But that's basically how, Zachary got both of his buckets in this game was just transition and Trey realizing that he doesn't have to be the player who brings the ball up. That Jalen is going to be able to get it to him even if they're both on the move.
yeah. I mentioned this on my video breakdown, but tell me if in the arena it felt like the workload was much more manageable for Trey in this game, right? I mean, it seemed like he wasn't on the ball for 14 seconds and a 24-second shot, like every possession. And I think that's gonna benefit him across the season. Did it
I
feel
I
that way
think
in
so.
live?
Like again, like I thought, Onyeka's presence in the game made things easier for him because he was getting. I thought when Clint was in there, he was getting bracketed a lot of times. Both of
Yeah,
even if it was like somebody was staying with Clint, they were only staying far enough where they had one eye on Trey, and there was always kind of two people around him. And then, defensively, he still had, he was still working hard to get over screen. So it wasn't like you watch the game, you think, oh, this was an easy one for Trey. He took a lot of shots from Ben Simmons trying to get over screens in that game. And, you mentioned that Trey was, you know, figured out where the calls were going to come in that game. He was not pleased with the calls that he wasn't getting in that department. So, you know, he's a basketball genius, so he's going to figure out where to get him somewhere else,
yeah,
optimize the situation and figure out what's going to work.
yeah, yeah. And of course, he had that huge defensive play in the last minute, right? Just where he got the block strip out of bounds off of Schroeder. Like, Cam Thomas still made a couple of ridiculous shots to kind of keep it a one possession game. I mean, I felt like when he made that play, I was like, okay, that's kind of it. But Cam
Hmm.
Thomas was like, nope, game's not over yet. I mean, that's just he had no help. He's right in the middle on Schroeder. Like Congo was coming with help, but before Congo got really could kind of get there and impact the play, Trey got to make that play. That was just. I mean, and we saw. I feel like examples last year where late in the game, Trey knew how to kind of ramp up his defensive intensity and focus and activity, right? In a close game. And the Hawks were I mean, awful offensively in the clutch last year, but you saw some of that defensively from Trey last year. So that was just I think it's exciting for a team to see a guy who's more of an offensive, um, you know, not an elite offensive player, kind of show up defensively on a critical possession. Is just something that kind of elevates the enthusiasm and kind of brings energy to the team. When when your leader does that, I think that's I think that's fantastic and super, is super helpful. Um, you know, so it's, I thought V was a lot better in the second half, than the first half. I thought he kind of settled in, and we have to remember he hasn't played when he was playing last year. The pressure was lowered, Bucks, were seemed cemented in like playing almost impossible for them to kind of get out of it. And now and with the bogey injury, he's probably going to play a
Yeah.
lot, like
Oh yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
And same, it's probably the same with Risa Shea. Is he's probably got to play more than what the blueprint was kind of heading into. And when you read the news on Bogey, it seems uh not. I mean, we don't have a lot of specifics yet on like how long is he going to. It's hard for me to read. How long is he going to be out? How long going to be without him?
Yeah.
And maybe it's
I
going
mean,
to
I
take a
think
few days to
that's
figure that out.
yeah. There's no. I mean, right now, I think the report is just the right hamstring tendinopathy, and it's like if there's nothing to go with that, that's a very vague description of something that could be like really short term or longer term. Like it's
Yeah.
not really very specific.
Yeah, yeah, and some of like Kawhi stuff started with like I mean when you're talking muscle, bone, tendon, like I mean, it is sort of a wild card on like how that is, how much, so but I mean we've talked across the off season like this is where your depth hopefully shows up, you're leading into it maybe more early, really early in the season maybe, but this is where your depth, really shows up. For me, losing Bogey makes it a little harder. The plan is to let Hunter basically play the backup 4 minutes, when Jalen's off. You lose that shooting with Bogey, and it makes it a little harder with Hunter. Again, Hunter's at an above baseline, pretty well above baseline shooter for when he's playing at that position. But I mean, Bogey's one of the best, 8 shooters in the league. Whatever number you pick your number, right? And it's if it's a week, it hurts. If it's a month, we have no idea, right? It's tough, and you wonder how much Garrison's going to play. If there's going to be a bit of an absence there, and so it'd be interesting to see how Quinn kind of responds with all that sort of stuff. And I mean, to me, like you listen to Quinn talking, it's like they're going to try to lean into the defense, and kind of create offense from defense. Quinn talks about that a lot, and so maybe that's what they lean on for a little while, depending upon Rookie's gonna be out just a little bit or not more than just a little bit.
Yeah, and it felt like the second half was tough for Bogey defensively, but I think for his first half defensively was better, and I don't, how much of that was tied to the injury. I guess we don't know, but
Yeah,
it may explain part of it. What did you think of Zachary's first game?
I mean, I thought he was good. I mean, to me, the thing that caught my eye was in the preseason. The move was get Hunter out early and get Ricochet out with the starters and fairly early in the first quarter. That's not what Quinn did here, you know. And I like the idea of Ricochet spending his first three, four, five, six, seven, whatever defensive possessions out there with the starters, with Jalen, with Clint, you know, with Dyson. I think that's reduces his. I think it gives him a more manageable entry point around his set of defensive responsibilities. That's not what happened in this game at all. So it'll be interesting to see if that's a little bit different, tomorrow night versus Charlotte. But I mean, he looks like a guy who knows what he's doing. I like that when he was open, he fired away from the 3-point line. I like that when he was going downhill, he attacked downhill. You know, and I mean, for me, when you watch his play in Europe, depending upon what game you pulled up, and it's hard because you're like, oh, a lot of us on YouTube pulling up a random game, whatever it is, right? I thought he was really aggressive. I thought he was really aggressive, and I thought he was like, I'm downhill, I'm going to the rim. I'm going to go attack, And when he was wide open from the 3-point line, he fired away, and I think that's a great starting point. So overall, I think he was good. For me, when they were struggling to contain the ball, on especially DHOs in the middle of the floor on defense, like in the preseason, Bison plus Ricochet lineups, man, they were crazy good at containing the ball. When you have both of those guys on the floor together, the Quinn didn't really set up his rotation in game one. Those two guys didn't really play a lot together, you know. And I wonder um, how much of a reaction Quinn has or doesn't have to getting those two guys on the floor together. Because when like you got one guy on the ball, the other guy on the weak side, like man, they in the preseason it felt like they were covering everything, And it's like I want me watching like I want that. you know, like a kid who wants candy. That's like candy to me. Watching those two guys work collectively. There were times in the preseason they managed to switch. I don't want to switch. Yeah, we switch, and the switch worked out great. And so I'm just like, I'm like that's sugar to me. Wanting to see those two guys work together defensively is like sugar to me. And I didn't get a lot of that last night. So,
I'm sure you
I,
will
I
at some
want
point. I thought Zachary was good in the ways that you mentioned. Like there was no indecisiveness. Like he's just playing basketball, and he was, when he was supposed to shoot, he shot. When he was supposed to go to the rim, he went to the rim. I thought he was maybe a little bit stationary on offense. One of the things that he's pretty great at is, flowing through the offense and finding the soft spots and knowing when to cut. A little bit like in a V kind of manner, just kind of, where exactly the soft spots of the defense are. And I thought he was pretty good defensively, like fighting over screens, knowing where he's supposed to be. I thought the one thing that maybe he was a little bit uh just needs more reps is like when he had some help responsibility and the ball was getting behind him to his man. It felt like a couple of times when he had to turn his shoulder and go back. Like, NBA offenses are pretty prescriptive, so you kind of know like the guy should be here because they're always planting the guys at the same spots pretty much. And it felt like he took bad angles, like when he would turn his shoulder and try to get back to his man, like the footwork and the angle, like he was taking an angle where it was going to be pretty easy to drive on him, as opposed to where he could kind of use his size and be in the right spot, and then somebody, might cut their drive short because it wasn't really going anywhere. Like I think, just with more reps as he cleans up some of those angles, it's, he's going to be able to be the help defender that he is without really giving up as much. I'm like throwing my mic all over the place. My audio is probably going to be terrible, but I'm excited. So I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, the audio volume will be a little bit of a variance, but Kevin's right. He's excited here, so and expressive. So I know that, and I know that's good. Yeah, for me, a lot of that comes down to ball containment, like Bogey overhelping, not overhelping. Is that just Bogey being Bogey? Like I felt like the ball containment was an issue,
Right.
and I felt like Brooklyn did a great job of moving their attack points into different spots to kind of create that stress on the Hawks defense. I think that was different from anything I saw in the preseason. But I mean, that roster should be able to contain the ball, and it's just a matter of you know McQuinn rode that starting group a long time in the first quarter, like a long time in the first quarter. Is that what we should expect like consistently now? Or is it going to be different, right? And like I said, for me, I want to see stretches where, especially against opposing team second unit, where Dyson and Ricochet just like basically like lock the ball down, for entire possessions. I'm probably overstating, kind of the impact they can have, but when those two are on the court together, it's good. But yeah, I mean it's going to be interesting to see how Quinn adjusts with now with Boogie missing whatever time he misses and what the defensive kind of lineup construction looks like. It's going to be interesting to see. But like I said, I think some of that was just I think if you're watching the game from the Hawks perspective, Brooklyn did a lot of smart stuff on offense. They did a lot of really smart stuff on offense. And for a team who is as limited as they are, as I think they are, from ball handling, they did a lot of smart stuff to kind of create stress on the Hawks, and like, but I think they got a pretty, like I think they got themselves pretty good coach. So it's going to be interesting to see. They're definitely in a rebuild year, that's for sure. But I think they're going to be consistently competitive. And will surprise people in terms of just how close they keep games. So for Hawks fans, it might be like, oh my God, this is Brooklyn. They're rebuilding. We should have won this game by 20 points. If you have league pass, go out of your way to watch them once every 2 weeks, or whatever you can, and they're going to be a fun watch. There's one of those teams that like might win 31 games, but I watched 25 times this year.
Oh,
That's kind
wow.
of the sickle part for me.
Yeah, and I'm repeating myself now, but I continue to be excited for the prospects of, what the Hawks might get going here because it just seems like Trey is on in a way that maybe he hasn't been in some previous Octobers. Like his shot just looks great. Like there have been Octobers where it's just like, Trey eventually finds his shot and he's a different player, but like right now he just looks so consistent in his footwork and in his shot, like just looks fantastic. It's um and it's kind of like Dyson with the defense. Like once you've got that one guy, everything can kind of play off of it. Same thing for Trey on offense. Like he looks masterfully in control on offense, and the thing that sets it all up is his ability to shoot, and he has that right now. So everything can kind of flow from that because he's always going to be smart and make the right decisions. He had some unbelievable passes.
Yes,
I mean, the one the one to Daniels, like there were just so many passes. The pass, to Riza Shea for the dunk, like they were just uh, you know, he's I don't know. You mentioned it with bogey shooting, like where is he in terms of passes? He's got to be like a top three passer in the league, right? And
yeah.
he just looks like he's on, and so that's
He's
always a
like
great starting point when you have that. The rest of the team can just flow off of it.
he's like a basketball quarterback. He uses his eyes and he moves defenders, and he knows how to wait out a decision by one specific defender.
Oh yeah.
And it's so fun to watch. I know Hawks fans know this, but like every year they take the kind of the GM poll or whatever it is, and like Trey never shows up in best passers in the league. It's like it's
Is
just
that
the
one of the
most
categories? Really?
yes.
Because he's
Yeah.
never like I always look for I don't even read it. I go Control F, find Atlanta. Okay, what are the two things? And Trey's
Yeah.
never like there's
That's
always
his
like
job.
one hawk. I
You
didn't
know.
even know there was a best passer category.
And
So
he's no I
somebody's
mean
clearly not doing the job. He's not even getting an honorable. They like list the honorable mentions.
and I mean, so I'm going from memory here. Maybe I missed something, but he's never shown up in the top three, top four, top five ever.
That's
And,
crazy.
and for me that you know, yeah, there seems to be from there. So we'll see that.
All right. Glenn has some news.
Oh yeah. Patreon. Yeah, in my Twitter/X profile, you'll find the link there. $3 a month is all I ask. First 5 games get free. But if you want the video breakdowns, subscribe. And I'll do a lot of other um conversations, chats, um written kind of thought pieces and things like that, and try to make that available to everyone. The only thing that after 5 games, the video breakdowns will be for those people who are paid subscribers. Still put a lot of stuff out on Twitter. I'll still push things out there, so I'm not trying to red velvet rope the whole thing. But I'm able to do more in-depth work on Patreon that I can do on Twitter. So if you want to come jump in over there, we'd love to have you.
Outstanding. All right. Looking forward to some more games. No, none of these weeks with no context and no clues, and we have to read between the lines of what Quinn says. Don't want to do any more of that.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, the divisional game here on Friday night, and Charlotte was competitive with Houston.
More than
last night.
competitive.
Yeah, more than about yeah. And Charles Lee is
And
their
they've got a
coach.
new sharp, yeah, they got a new sharp group
Yeah,
too.
for sure. So and Lamelo was great against Houston. And they have centers that can really move, you know. And so I think it'll be a fun game. I think it'll be a fun game. Hawks will miss Bogey, for sure. And we'll have to kind of see how they generate some offense through different actions and different, techniques to try maybe more points at the rim, transition, whatever they kind of lead into. They'll have to offset that as they can. But having you and I are big Charles Lee fans. I know that. So maybe apart from when they're playing the Hawks, really rooting for Charles Lee to have some success over there in Charlotte.
Yeah, I'm gonna
If
have to
not
ask
tomorrow.
Quinn tomorrow. I'm gonna because like when Quinn left, Charles Lee came in, so I'm gonna ask him tomorrow if he got like Quinn's job when Quinn's left. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's funny. Like one of my imprinted memories of that era was I don't remember. I think I went to a game in Milwaukee, and Delvin Mack wasn't playing a ton, at the time. And Sheldon was out getting his it seemed like his cardio in, just running and running and running, 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 right? And Carl's was running, all the running Sheldon was doing, Carl's doing with him, you know. And it was just really, interesting to kind of see that. I remember going to summer league when Charles was the summer league coach, and people have heard this before, but Diamond Stone was on the Hawks summer league team that year, and for 5 games or whatever it was, I heard he had his diamond hands. He had diamond like Charles imploring Diamond to get his hands up. So, big Charles Lee fan, over here, and hope he, is starting a successful long kind of head coaching career. But he's starting from a standpoint of an organization that needs to kind of build up from what they're going for. So hoping for a Hawks win for Hawks fans, but also would be lying if I said I wasn't rooting for Charles Lee over there too.
All right then. Good night, Bob.
Good night, Bob.